Hi there, and welcome to Flip the Script Season 1, Episode 18, 7 types of calls SDRs should be listening to prepare to become AEs. My name is Becc Holland. I'm the CEO, founder, and general queen of the universe over at Flip the Script. Before we jump in, if you go to flipthescript.co and make sure that you download the deck so you can follow along at each step of the way. Other than that, let's go ahead and jump in. There are 7 types of calls that you can have them listen to, and I put the type of call and then examples for each one of these types of calls. But let's start with the first 3. The first type of call that your SDR can listen to help them become an AE and prepare to become an AE is number 1 for calls they set. So you can use a conversation intelligence software like Chorus is who I would recommend, but this is a great way to diagnose. Number 1, they get to know the demo flow and the process, etc., and how their sellers are selling. But a really great side note, if they're listening to these kind of calls, is they start to get to know whether the meeting was qualified and why. So it actually ends up starting to update how they're setting meetings because they hear the prospect say like, yeah, this sounds really, really good, but we actually don't have budget right now, or this isn't fit for my team because of X, Y, and Z reason. So they kind of, asterisk mark or side note is it helps the SDR learn how to set better calls to the account executive at the same time as it helps them dive into the platform and know how account executives are performing the call. The second bucket is that they can listen to is segmented calls. So SMB, mid-market, enterprise, general business, and strategic, they're different for every single company and how they define them, but the principle stays the same of, an SMB call is typically going to be much different than an enterprise call. I've heard for enterprise, don't let the whale sink the ship. In terms of enterprise, there's going to be a lot of more detail that goes into POC. There's going to be a lot more decision makers, a lot more cross-lateral selling, etc. But they're very, very different businesses in terms of segment. And so an SMB deal, for instance, can happen much more quickly and only involve one person, whereas an enterprise deal can include up to 15 to 20 people who are in the decision-making room. So segmented calls gives an SDR a really good flavor, even if they are going to transition and become a junior AE or an AE within a specific segment. This can help them understand across all segments what kind of trends they're going to start to see so that whenever they do become an AE, they know the nuances and differences, so it helps update the way they're going to pitch the product. The third bucket is stage calls. So this is for the different stages of the sales cycle. So, there's a litany of, not exhaustive list here, but a litany of list here of the different kind of stages. But discovery calls, demo calls, proof of concept, proposal, negotiation, red lines, all very, very different calls. Some of these calls can be consolidated into just a few of them within like SMB, for instance. But a discovery call and a demo call are very, very different. Discovery, you should be after understanding your prospect, why they jumped in the line, what they're looking to achieve. Is there any kind of pain points that they were looking to address, hypothetically with your product if they were able to buy it. But that's very different than a demo is you're gearing the demo, you're showcasing your product based on the information that you learned in discovery. So all these calls are very, very different. Proof of concept versus proposal. Proof of concept, you're talking about what are the success criteria to make this proof of concept happen really well, what's very important to them, whereas proposal, you're talking about money, right? So all these different calls, very, very important to a sales cycle, very, very important for an account executive to learn how to do, and also very, very different from one another. So SDRs can listen to different stage calls, and they can use like a smart playlist in Chorus, for example, to say, I want to know all the discovery calls, for SMB deals, and they can kick them in there in an automatic fashion. So your SDRs don't even have to think about which calls to select. They can just go to a smart playlist that you can build for them. Number 4, competitive calls. These are great calls for SDRs to listen to. Typically, when I work with SDR teams and account executive teams, I say, what are the 2 things that you want to learn, about your own company? And they almost always say the same 2 things. I want buyer persona cards on how our buyer personas are different, and I want competitive differentiators. So a lot of times, especially within B2B tech, platforms can be very, very similar. I'm thinking of a number of them in specific in my head, but I'm not going to mention anyone. A lot of times when people go head to head, their product roadmap, their features, etc., can be very similar. So oftentimes when one company releases one feature, the next company, if it's valid, will make that feature within 2 to 3 months. And then they release, company B releases a feature and then company A starts over again. So it's like the product roadmap oftentimes, especially within mid-market companies and hypergrowth companies and category creation in specific, they follow each other in terms of product roadmap of what is the new standard of what to offer. So competitive differentiators can get very, very muddy for these types of platforms because their platform is changing so often, and which buyer persona cares about which competitive differentiator. So I'll give you an example. When I was at Chorus, I worked with a product team and we basically released Cold Call Central. Cold Call Central was so we had catered to account executives in the past. How do I break down all the different stages of the sales cycle? Negotiation, pricing, discovery, demo, you get the gist. And when I came over to Chorus, I said in my head, I wish there was some kind of engine that would help me break down Cold Call Central in specific. Cold calls in specific. So, they're very, very different than a longer call. So what happens in the first 30 seconds? What about connect rates? What about direct dials versus phone trees? What about voicemails? What about gatekeepers? But the pain points for an SDR and the information that they want to know is very, very different for what an account executive wants to know. So typically, this is very, very in line with one different buyer persona. But a competitive differentiator based off of that, okay, we sell into sales enablement, we sell into SDR, we sell into AE. AE would want, the Chorus proper product. An SDR would want to know Cold Call Central. Cold Call Central is a competitive differentiator, but it doesn't matter to an account executive. So knowing that per buyer persona can be very, very important to an SDR, AE, or anyone in the selling business. So competitive calls is a great place to source which competitive differentiators are resonating with which buyer persona so that the SDR can update how they're pitching and also learn how to close in that process. So I put a litany of different calls, types of competitive calls even that can happen, product differentiators, culture differentiators when they want to know how your teams are different, pricing, how are they different? Rip and replace is a good call to bring up when it comes to competitive calls, when they're using your competitor and they want to know, what are your differentiators and how can they rip and replace because of one, single item that maybe wasn't being met with the competitor. When they're happy with their competitor, when they're not happy with their competitor. And this last one I think is a really interesting one. One competitive call or type of competitive call that I would like to know, that I wanted to know as an SDR leader and I wanted to know as an SDR is called price gouging. So oftentimes someone is using a software and they want to up at renewal. They want to spike down the pricing of the current software that they're using, but they have no intention of actually leaving that software provider. So what they kind of do to stir the pot is one of two things. They either go to LinkedIn and they say, blank versus blank, Rihanna versus Beyonce, who's better? And they stir up the pot. And oftentimes software vendors will spike down their pricing because they made it that competitive post and you see everyone piling in on the post, or they'll say okay, I'm going to go to the competitor of the current software that I'm using and I'm going to get pricing from them and I'm going to leverage that in my renewal with this current company that I'm using. So I have no plan of leaving my current company, but I do want it for less money. So I'm going to go to their competitor and get really low pricing so I can bring it back to this first platform. Those calls happen very, very frequently. And so I like to surface them to the SDR so that they can hear them. Oftentimes I've had people jump on the line and they're like, yeah, so we're using, X and, we're here because we want to know competitive differentiators. And the first question I'll ask them is, okay, no problem. How happy are you? Or what's your experience been with the other provider so far, if you don't mind me asking? And they're like, oh, well, they've been great. We're really, really happy with them. We use it with X, Y, and Z ways, et cetera, et cetera. They've been really, really helpful to my sales team. And I usually respond with, no problem. That all sounds good. Can I level with you? Why am I on the phone then? Sounds like you're really happy with them and sounds like you have everything going on. And they're like, yeah, well, I just wanted to see, and I'll usually cut through it and I'll say, did you just want to come over here to get a quote? If so, I can dish you over a quote and you can use it to leverage it in the renewal process. And they'll say, yeah, that's why I'm here. So this is a really interesting type of call that you essentially, I think the general rule of thumb is no pain, no sale, or no gap, no sale. So it's like, I would want to know that at the beginning as an account executive, because I wouldn't want to waste a ton of time trying to sell to this person if it's never going to happen to begin with. So price gouging call is a very unique call, but it's a really useful call where I teach the SDRs like, okay, this is how to identify that call and this is what to say in that call, to where you actually are advocates with your prospect in the end. And you don't waste the time to run together and put together all these proposals and forecast it and get super excited. The fifth type of call is close one calls. Be outcome based, right? So you want to know the types of calls that actually led to something working. So a lot of advice on LinkedIn where people will say, you need to do this and you need to say this and you need to, etc. And I would reverse the math of like, instead of saying there's an industry average for talk time, I want to know for the based off of which rep was talking longer and shorter, I would want to know which rep is my best rep and how much are they talking, because I want to mirror what they're doing. So closed one calls, I put discovery, demo, negotiation, POC, etc. But you want to listen to all of the different stage calls that led to something being successful. So oftentimes when people in the MLB, for instance, are doing some kind of regression analysis, they want to understand what made them win the World Series, which exact, variable had which course of action on the deal. Then it's like, okay, I want to narrow it down to what are the things that cause conversion so that I can implicate those into all of the deals that aren't resulting in closed one. So this is a great way to say, like, I want to know all the different pieces of the pie that happened beforehand when the pie was successful. And then the last two types of calls. Number 6, objection handling calls. People love hearing about objection handling because it happens to us quite frequently. So I would tag calls. Again, you can really easily in Chorus build smart playlists to where they will filter these based on criterion that you don't have to do any kind of manual labor and throw them in. But not the right person, no time, not interested, send me an email, in a meeting, using a competitor, no budget. This is a great starting list of calls where objections come up so that your SDRs or your account executives can hear when those objections come up, what are people saying, and when they're saying those things, are they successful, so that I can use the best option based on data of what caused conversion. So I would make a list of all of the right calls where you heard not the right person. Again, very, very, I hate to product pitch, but very, very easy to do in Chorus and can make a big impact with your team. And then the last one is what I call unicorn calls. So unicorn calls are just fun one-off calls, or when an AE handled something particularly well. There's a couple of different situations I'm thinking in my head where something particularly magical happened on that call, and you want to make a library with those calls so that when people are onboarding, or when SDRs are coming into, new SDRs are coming into the game, or AEs are coming into the game, they can hear when that rep handled something particularly well. So there's an easy way to tag this of like, okay, there is, something that someone said, the way they handled an objection that was really, really great. And I want the rest of my team to hear it because that's how we're going to handle the objection from here on out. I have used Chorus an insatiable amount for that, of like, hey, every time, I put on this last slide, every time someone comes up with a really great talk track, or they say something that worked particularly well with the prospect, I'm going to quickly tag the rest of my team so that every single other person on the team, is going to start using that hook. So that enabled us to build really, really quickly, of like almost our reps were an amalgam of all of the best parts of every rep. So maybe rep 1 did something particularly well, and the second piece not so well, and vice versa for the second rep. So it's like, I want to tease out the gold and bleed out the chaff and make every single rep a compilation of all of the behaviors that are going to make someone successful. So that is everything. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. If you like this session, you want to hear more, and you want to make me really, really happy, go to flipthescript.co and you can see more sales sessions on sales topics. And if you really love the session, go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn, tag Flip the Script me in your top 2 takeaways so I know what you want to hear more of. Either way, hope you have a great rest of your day.